The film begins in a small workshop where a person named Charlie is sitting, and he is repairing an old plane that was a gift from his wife, whose name is Sarah. And Sarah comes to greet him because she is traveling to a conference and will be staying for 2 days in London. And we know from the dialogue that took place between them that Charlie works at the CIA. Specifically, he works as a data analyst and cryptographer at the intelligence agency.
Then Charlie goes to his work at the agency and enters the Department of Data Analysis and Encrypted Messages, sits down at his desk and starts his work, and while he was working, opens a secret file with leaks from an unknown source, and there is a code that is always repeated in front of him on the screen as Anchaline. Often it is a pseudonym of someone or an unknown entity. The information in front of him is unclear at first, but among the lines it is understood that it is information about secret operations of American intelligence outside the law, especially in the Middle East. Of course, Charlie is surprised by what he sees and begins to research more about the subject until he discovers that the U.S. government carries out illegal operations in other countries and hires terrorists to carry out those operations. The biggest shock for Charlie is when he learns that the one in charge of these operations is his boss, whose name is Moore, who is also at the same time the deputy director of the agency. Of course, Charlie is shocked, so he leaves the office quickly, and by chance he meets his friend Alex on the way, and Alex notices that he is not himself and worried about something. So Charlie tells him about the secret files that he knew, and Alex asks him to get himself out of this topic so as not to get himself into trouble. At night, when Charlie comes home, he misses his wife very much, so he calls her on her phone, but it is turned off, and he sends her a voice message telling her that he misses her, and it is clear that Charlie loves his wife Sarah very much. The second day, when Charlie arrives at work, he finds Moore waiting for him in his office, and Charlie is surprised and asks him if there is something. Moore asks him if he has heard anything about what happened in London, but Charlie tells him that he does not understand what he is talking about. Moore asks him to come with him to the Director of Intelligence, and she will explain to him. Here Charlie begins to worry, and when they arrive at the manager's office, she greets him and tells him that a terrorist attack has occurred on the Christopher Hotel located in London, and that many people have died, including his wife. Of course, Charlie does not understand what happened and breaks down in tears, after which he enters a severe depression and does not understand that he will never see his wife again, but all he is concerned about at that time is to find out who did this to his wife and take revenge on her. He goes to sit down with Moore the next day and asks him if he has come up with anything new, and Moore tells him that they are still working on the investigation and that it will take them some time. But Charlie is not satisfied with this situation and feels that they are stalling, so he decides to take a step himself in the matter. And the next day, Charlie goes to receive his wife's body. He also finds out that his wife had bought him a gift with a letter before she died, and the first time he reads the letter, he keeps crying a lot. The next day, Charlie arrives at his office and begins collecting information about the terrorist group that killed his wife, and he knows that they were in a building next to the hotel where his wife was in order to steal certain things from there. But what happened was that the security saw them, so they eliminated the security and fled to the hotel and took hostage from there so that they could escape with it from the police. But it so happened that Sarah, his wife, defended the hostage they wanted to take, and the terrorists took Sarah in her place. Charlie discovers that those who kidnapped his wife are named Mishkow and Eilish, but the person who killed Sarah is named Schiller. And this is an important and dangerous man with many ties to mercenaries, and it seems that these terrorists are working as a front for elements of the corrupt state. Schiller's special assistant, her name is Gretchen, is also involved with them in the matter. She was a former intelligence officer. She's currently in Paris. She has a habit to go every day to a certain cafe in Paris. When Charlie goes to present this information to Moore, he is surprised that Moore is not surprised, and discovers that Moore originally knew all this information but is hiding it from him. Of course, Charlie is fanatical and does not understand why Moore is acting like this, and Moore tells him that they cannot take a real step on this issue now in order to preserve the integrity of the state, and offers him to go to the psychologist because his nerves are obviously tired. Charlie actually goes to sit with the psychologist and tells her that he feels very angry inside, that he wants revenge and has not comprehended that his wife died in such a terrible way, and is shocked more than Moore's passivity because he does not want to help him get back the right of his wife, although this is their task and they must avenge those who killed his wife. But it is clear that they do not want to do this for some reason that he does not know, and he tells her that Sarah's blood will not be wasted even if he regains her right himself. And the second day, when Charlie arrives at work, he enters a secret room, and there he steals dangerous files regarding Moore's illegal actions, and then he enters Moore's office and confronts him with everything he knows. We know that Moore arranged many terrorist operations, including what happened at a hospital in Syria, as well as at a military base in Yemen, but he also orchestrated another operation that happened in Afghanistan. Charlie also finds evidence that Moore and the agency concealed the death of more than 1,000 civilians, all of whom were killed in illegal operations, and then fabricate it all as just a terrorist attack for the sake of common political interests of America and other countries. Of course, Moore is nervous about his words and is afraid of exposing him, telling him that if he leaked all this information, he would disappear completely, but Charlie tells him that he is not afraid. Moore tells him that everything he did was in order to defend and preserve his country, even if by illegal means, but Charlie replies to him that all this does not matter to him. He tells him that there is a certain code that he must enter himself every 5 days, and if he does not, all his files will fall into the hands of the 3 most famous journalists in the country, and the whole world will know his scandals, and he will be imprisoned. But he is the only one who cannot expose, and if he thinks about imprisoning or killing him, the files will immediately leak. Of course, Moore is scared and nervous and asks him what he wants in exchange for these files not to leak, and Charlie tells him that he needs his help because he wants to kill the people who killed his wife himself, and without their help, because he basically no longer trusts them. Of course, Moore is surprised that Charlie has no experience in fighting and has never held a weapon in his life before, but Charlie is adamant about his position and asks him to put him in specialized training to learn martial arts on its origins, so Moore is forced to agree so as not to expose. He makes him take practical training under the supervision of a colonel named Henderson. And the days go by and we see Charlie developing until he reaches being like a professional, but after a while we see that the training did not bring him any result, because basically he's a sensitive human being and creature, and he could never hurt anyone despite being a genius. And one day Henderson sits down with him and tells him that there are people who are born natural killers. But unfortunately, he's not one of those, because when the time of the mission comes and he stands in front of the enemies, he will not be able to point a weapon at their faces. He will not be able to pull the trigger and kill them because he is not by nature a murderer. And he understands that to fight, he needs not only a person with physical strength, but he needs a dead-hearted person, capable of killing people from within without feeling remorse or guilt. And unfortunately, he's not that person, and it is better to forget about the subject altogether. Of course, Charlie is affected by his words, but he remains at his position and wants to take the right of his wife himself. At the same time, we see that Moore and the agency are conducting their investigations and research to find out the location of the secret code planted by Charlie, which contains all the information and data that will expose them. They enter his office, leaving only a place in it, and search it, but they also do not find her. They also go to his house and search for the code, but they do not find it either. And of course, Moore gets very angry, and he decides at that moment that he has to get rid of him no matter what. Moore asks Henderson to get rid of Charlie, and Henderson sneaks into the room where Charlie was sleeping at night to kill him. But he is surprised that he is not in the room and discovers that he escaped because he knew and was sure that they would try to get rid of him. Moore discovers that Charlie had planted a listening device on him and had been spying on him for the past weeks to find out what they were planning for him. Charlie then makes himself a fake ID and a fake passport and travels to France. But the agency knows that he has traveled to Paris, so they decide to send someone after him to kill him. And when Charlie arrives, he rents an apartment in front of the cafe where Gretchen always goes, and he keeps watching the cafe from the window until he sees her arrive. He quickly opens his laptop and manages to hack her phone and knows everything about her, as well as her place of residence. At night, he takes advantage of her absence from her house and breaks into the apartment, discovering that she has an appointment the next day at an asthma clinic. He takes all the information he wants from her apartment and then goes out and hides on the stairs. And the first thing he sees her enter her apartment is hiding behind the wall and raises his weapon towards her without her seeing him. But when he is interested in pulling the trigger, he gets nervous and cannot kill her, although he had the opportunity to get rid of her in a second and without anyone knowing. He returns to his apartment in frustration and starts looking for the clinic where she will go the next day. And he knows that the clinic specializes in treating asthma patients. And the next day, Charlie goes to buy a certain kind of rose that causes allergies to asthmatics, takes pollen from it and grinds. And at that time, Gretchen is in the asthma clinic, sitting in a small room surrounded by devices with oxygen, doing certain exercises to improve breathing. After the end of the session, the doctor leaves her and goes out, and at the same moment, Charlie enters, wearing a blanket, closes the door on her, and traps her inside the glass room, and pollen enters her from the oxygen hole so that she cannot breathe. He tells her that he won't take her out unless she tells him where Schiller is. Gretchen starts choking and asks him who he is and what he wants from her, and he tells her that he is the husband of the woman they killed, and it's better for her to cooperate with him than to leave her locked in the room until she suffocates and dies. But Gretchen is not able to breathe, and Charlie is afraid that she will die, so he takes her out of the room. As soon as she gets out, she attacks him and starts beating him. Then she quickly runs out of the clinic, runs down the street between cars, while Charlie runs after her, until suddenly a car appears and Gretchen is run over and dies. Of course, Charlie is shocked by what happened because she was the only one who would help him get to the place of the gang. He quickly and without thinking takes her phone and runs away from the place before the police come. Of course, Charlie is feeling very frustrated and dominated by depression. So that night, he decides to stay up at a nightclub to change the atmosphere. But while he is in the club, he is surprised by Henderson's presence in front of him, and he immediately understands that he came to kill him. So he quickly runs away from the place and goes to hide in another building, but he is surprised that Henderson caught up with him. He has to face him to know what he wants from him, and is surprised to find him giving him life advice and judgment to know how to deal with people. Charlie is surprised by his words and thanks him for the advice, but Henderson tells him that he planted a bomb in that place and it will explode in a matter of moments, and seconds later the bomb already explodes. Charlie hurries to escape, then he communicates with Uncle Lane and tells him that he needs his help and he must see him face to face. So Uncle Lane tells him that he is in Turkey and sends him the address of the place where they will meet. The second day, Charlie arrives in Turkey, and there he meets Uncaline and is surprised that she is a woman. She tells him that they should leave immediately and asks him to meet her in half an hour at her car. And indeed, after half an hour, Charlie goes to get in the car with her and they drive off. On the way, she tells him about her life, and we learn that she is a Russian widow who is associated with a former KGB agent, currently working in intelligence, and it was her husband who taught her how to encrypt data. Throughout the past period, she has been communicating with Charlie to help him expose criminals in the country. Charlie tells her that he needs her help now to get to the people who killed his wife and eliminate them himself, and she tells him that she agrees and takes him to her secret home. There, he discovers that for the past period, she had been collecting the same information that he had collected about the terrorists, but that she had access to new information because she knew that Mishkow is currently in Spain.
And at the same time, we see the director of intelligence sitting with Moore because she suspects that he is doing something wrong. But Moore remains evasive in speech and does not make her feel anything from what he is doing. The manager leaves him and goes to get in her car, and there she finds her assistant has brought her a photo of Henderson, and he tells her that Moore sent Henderson after Charlie to kill him. And here the director begins to make sure that something is not right, so she decides to investigate the matter herself.
The next day, Charlie arrives in Spain and discovers that Mishkow spends most of his time in the pool. He decides to plant explosives inside. One day, while Mishkow is swimming on the roof of the building, as usual, he is surprised by Charlie standing in front of him. Charlie demands that he tell him where Schiller is, and Mishkow is surprised and at first thinks it's a joke and asks him who he is. Charlie replies that he is the husband of the woman they killed and tells him that he will not hurt him if he cooperates, but if he tries to escape, he will press the button in his possession, which will immediately blow up the pool below him. But Mishkow refuses to disclose anything and tries to swim quickly to get out of the pool before it explodes. However, he does not succeed because Charlie presses the button and the pool gradually begins to explode from under him until he is killed. Meanwhile, Anna Colleen is in contact with Charlie, monitoring the situation and coordinating with him. And as soon as Mishkow is killed, she immediately contacts him and asks him to run away because Henderson is at the place. Charlie rushes off and hides inside one of the buildings, while Anna Colleen gives him instructions on the paths he should take to escape. But Henderson comes very close to catching him until suddenly another agent arrives and attacks Henderson, A violent fight breaks out between them that ends with Henderson seriously injured, but he still manages to kill the agent. Charlie keeps watching him from afar, hesitating between stepping in to help him or leaving him to his fate. However, Anna Colleen intervenes through communication and tells him that he must run away immediately, and Charlie responds to her words and leaves the place quickly. At the same time, the director of intelligence calls Moore and asks him about Charlie's whereabouts, to which he replies that he's still on mourning leave after suffering from severe depression since the death of his wife. Then the manager makes sure that he is lying, but she does not confront him about it directly. In the surveillance unit inside the intelligence center, the team manages to locate Charlie, and they find out that he's in constant contact with someone who provides him with information, and this character turns out to be Uncaline. They decide to get rid of it. At night, while Charlie and Anne are sleeping, the alarm goes off and they realize that the agency has detected their location and sent special forces to get rid of them. The two quickly flee and get into the car to escape, but unfortunately, the troops manage to kill Uncaline, while Charlie manages to survive. He stops at a distant place, overwhelmed with grief, sits next to her crying with a burning, imprints one last kiss on her head before leaving her in the car and drives off. He walks confused, does not know where to turn. In his mind, he does not leave the scene of his wife's murder. The anger inside him grows more and more until he loses any indifference to what is around him. Meanwhile, he is in possession of the phone he stole from Mishkow, and suddenly a message arrives on it revealing to him that there is a missile deal to be made in Romania and that Eilish will be responsible for the delivery of the shipment. On the day of delivery, Eilish is standing next to the rocket boxes, watching the shipment, and suddenly Charlie appears in front of him and surprises him that he planted explosives in the whole shipment, warning him that if he moves from his place, the entire site will explode. He introduces himself, saying that he is Sarah's husband, and then demands that he reveals Schiller's whereabouts. It is then that Eilish is forced to admit that Schiller will be located on his own ship inside Russian waters. Charlie leaves him and walks away and then blows up the whole place. After that, he goes straight to Russia and begins to make a plan that will enable him to get to Schiller. Arriving at the port, he deliberately enters into a clash with one of the members of the Schiller gang. His intention was to be captured or taken to their leader, thereby reaching his greatest goal. And already, the thug takes him to the ship where Schiller is. There, Schiller tells Charlie that the murder of his wife was not intentional, but when he found himself surrounded by the police, he had no choice but to shoot her. Then he looks into his eyes and tells him that he does not look like a murderer, hands him his gun, sits on his knees in front of him, asking him to avenge his wife and kill him. Charlie grabs the gun and points it at him, and then remembers old words that he once heard, that whoever points a gun at his enemy may not be able to pull the trigger because he is not a killer by nature. And at that moment, Charlie makes sure that this statement applies to him, so he puts the gun aside and sits in his place without firing. Suddenly, they notice that the ship's course is changing by itself, and Schiller does not understand what is happening until Charlie surprises him that it was he who controlled the ship's system, and he became the controller of its destination. He reveals to him that the ship is heading towards Finnish territorial waters, where Interpol forces are waiting for them to catch them. Within minutes, Interpol and police forces storm the ship and arrest Schiller and his men. Then, the director of intelligence appears at a press conference to announce that she has discovered the existence of influential figures within the agency involved in illegal operations, and assures the people that everyone will be held accountable. At the same time, Moore and all his accomplices are arrested. A few days later, Charlie returns to his country, meets Henderson, and thanks him for not killing him even though the opportunity was there. Then he returns to his workshop to repair the old plane that was a gift from his late wife, and flies with it in the sky, feeling victorious after avenging her, to end the film with a shot of hope and freedom.